Hello. So, I thought I would talk about fathers today. It's Father's Day, and I got some insight today about the importance of a father. And the way that I got this I just gained a bigger picture view in a moment where I was thinking about the situations I've been through, like in relationships or relationships with men or a lack of man in my life and just being alone, fending for myself, all kinds of things, which maybe go into a little bit more detail. But basically, I was just thinking, oh, well, this is me living out the recreation of the fact that I didn't have a father, that I don't have a father. Like, I have a father, he's passed on from this incarnation. And still very much existing in the energetic realm. But he wasn't in the father role in my lifetime ever since he passed on when I was 9 years old. And I was just like, oh, okay, so I've been living out that energy of what it feels like to not have a father. And it seems so obvious and simple. It's like, yeah, well, you didn't have a father, so of course you're living out the energy of what it's like to not have a father. But the thing is that I just realized it, because I think being 9 years old, I was already very traumatized when my father passed on. And he also passed on in a very traumatizing way. And it took, like 12, much more than 12. It took, let's see, till about 37. So, 9, 10, I don't know, like 30 years more, 20 years more, we'll say. It took about 20 years more before I started to even get out of some of the trauma. So in the time up till then, like just the not having a father, it's like there was so much trauma with the father that kind of not having the father was probably more of a relief in some ways, just because the life had been so tumultuous up to the point when he did pass on. Um, the family line that my father is from, there was a lot of abuse, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of sexual abuse. I don't know that my father got sexually abused, but I know like his siblings did. And he definitely spent some time perpetuating that energy of violence, both giving and receiving. Like there's a time that I can remember that the police beat my father up so much that there was just no place on his face that wasn't purple. And that's just his face, his whole body was like that. And he was 6'4". So that was a lot of cops that did that stood around and did that to him. And it was probably in response to the words he was saying. He trashed some egos and some men with some inferiority complexes and too much authority for their own good, matched him in the energy of violence, but put him on the receiving end in that place. And I think he probably was detached from his heart, due to the upbringing that he had. He was very traumatized. So when you get traumatized, your heart tends to close. And so a lot of the decisions he was making were survival decisions and based on lack decisions. And there's not enough, and I want to escape. He used drugs to escape and checked out sort of with like, sweets or television. But I do remember that I was sort of, I was very fond of my father, like I still, when I was little and he was there, I wanted him in my life. I wanted to be around him. I wanted to play with him. But it was rough for me because I was really, really extra sensitive. And I say that only because I was traumatized by some very probably minor things, just yelling. But also, like, I was hung by the door jambs with my fingertips and things like this. So, so on the one hand, yeah, it was kind of rough for me having a father, but also I would stand behind his leg, when faced with a stranger when I was young. When I was like under 5 years old and there was someone new in the room, I was standing behind my father. So there was a part of me that felt like he was my protector. And the violence would erupt in the home. My mother went to a very like histrionic place during those events. Um, and, he never like black and blued her like that. He never bloodied her. But I think that he did like manhandle her, and I think that he mostly just caused damage to the home, like punching holes through the doors and the walls and smashing all the stuff. That was the kind of violence he perpetuated in the home. There were definitely harsh punishments for us very young children, such as pants pulled down, across the lap spankings, with belt, hand, you know. Um, and there was a lot of being told to go play. And there were hours in the corner, or what I remember to be hours in the corner. So I'm not saying that we all got beaten on a regular basis or anything. I'm just saying, like, being in the household with somebody who's emotionally dysregulated, and then actually two adults who are emotionally dysregulated, um, was quite a mess for me. So I was really in a traumatized state. It did cause me to feel some level of, like, oh, there's one less thing causing chaos in my life when Dad left. But because I was involved in his death, it was also very traumatizing. Um, because in actuality, when he took his own life and wanted to take all of our lives, and actually made me an accomplice to his taking his own life, and you know, I was left to deal with that at age 9. And actually, I probably don't think I would have even realized that I was an accomplice until I was put right into sort of like counseling with the school guidance counselor, mind you. Um, it was in the newspaper when this all happened, and so that I was in a small town, like school knew, and so I'm like in the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor is actually the one who pointed out to me that I actually assisted my father by giving him the water that he used to take the pills that he ended his life with. So I think just her asking me the questions that led me to that realization lodged in me this like, oh, like this adult is noticing that I did this. Like this is an awful thing. Like I did this, and if it doesn't mean that I did something bad knowingly, it definitely means my dad didn't care enough about my feelings to consider how that would affect me, you know? So either way, I was left in a state of like not knowing how to handle big heavy stuff. So dad for me, by all means, we could say wasn't perfect, but I do think that he loved us children. Like my siblings actually have more memories of playful times with my father than I do. If you were to talk to them, they have much more pleasant, light memories of actually playing with father. I mean, maybe they just enjoyed it more. They're both Aries. So maybe they just enjoyed it more being hung by the door jambs on your fingertips, like, whereas I was just like terrified of everything at that point in my life. Um, so it could have just been, stuff like that. But I think there was something about his size and stature and like just knowing that he could protect, that he wasn't trying to harm us necessarily, or at least you block that out when you are in a situation like that with harsh punishments, and it's the also your protector and your provider. It's like this thing happens in a child's brain in order to cope with that, and they, you know, that's when rose-colored glasses are formed, sort of. But you know, like I remember one time our car broke down on a busy street in the city, which is where we lived, and you know, like he took care of us and got us out of the situation and blah blah blah, you know. Um, there were a lot of, you know, there was times where there were fights and there was guns by other relatives pulled on my father, and there was times um, where there was a kidnapping. There was a time where I had to jump out of the car, you know, or he's moving down the road with the door open on the car, and I have to jump out, and being told I'll never see him again if I do, and because he's like about to kidnap me with my siblings, and then, you know, he successfully kidnapped a sibling of mine, and then we didn't know where he was, and it was scary, and we all, you know, and then there were the death threats of being the household where I was staying when my mom did leave, being threatened with the house is on fire in the middle of the night, you know, several nights in a row, and so there, there was just a lot, you know, there was a lot that really affected me with father. So, but I want to say this, you know, having all those experiences, first of all, you know, that was damage causing, obviously. And then, like I said, he was gone, and, you know, we moved on. It was 20 more years that I suffered in the traumas that I had experienced and endured and continued to endure during those 20 years, you know. But eventually, to get to the point where I could heal myself and have done, and now have sons who are fathers, and love seeing my sons as fathers, because, well, like I just see the care, you know, because I had three boys as, you know, my children, and my sons have had girls. And my sons didn't have experience with young children before they became fathers. So them becoming fathers was their like introduction to what it is to, you know, take care of a child and be with a girl. Well, you know what I mean. So to see them bond with the girls, take care of the girls, consider the girls, cherish the girls, protect the girls, step up because of their duty for the girls, it's been really beautiful. I love it. I think it was like a blessing and a gift for me to be able to see that energy, right? And so then that brings me to this, like, okay, cool, we broke the cycle, you know, that's cool. Um, and you might think, oh, that had to do with their father. And it's like, well, I don't think so. Because their father also abandoned them. So they have the same experience as me of a father abandoning. Um, so their father is still alive, but he's, I don't know, like 20 hours away in the same state, in the same country, and doesn't stay in touch. Maybe calls them once or twice, one of them once or twice a year. Is in a, you know, standoff with another one and doesn't even recognize the third one as existing, which is, a, you know, something that he'll have to deal with in his own heart when he realizes it, probably when he passes over. But very interesting though, but like that they were inspired to be the fathers they are by not having that, you know. So, but seeing the examples of them, so wholesome and beautiful, and I love it. And then just like looking at, okay, now that am in this healed space, you know, having healed the traumatic things, like let me look at this father thing in my life. Like, oh yeah, I've been living out the effects of not having a father in a loop. Like it was a trauma to not have a father, you know, because these traumas are what loop in our experience. And when I when I look at like what it was to not have a father, I'm babysitting or cat sitting while my son moves right now. So that was the cat moving this table. And he rubbed under my legs as he walked by, even though he knows that I do not want him to rub my legs. He's going to his father today. Um, okay, so sorry, it was distracting. It's been rough for me to share space with a cat, even though it's only been a couple days. I just, I do not like cats who go in litter boxes to walk around my home, like at all. They're beautiful creatures, majestic even, clever, interesting, worthwhile for many people, but just like I do not want litter paws walking around my house and someone who, like someone, and a little being who's been in a litter box, because this cat is like so particular about his litter box. He like, I mean, I get it, like, but like he makes sure all the litter is just so, and like, it's like, okay, you've been in that litter box, now do not rub my legs. Anyway, just a little insight about me and how I feel about germs and being contaminated by cat feces. Not good. Anyway, I was examining the role of father by looking at it through the lens of lack of father, right? And it's like, okay, well, because I didn't have father, I relived this situation where I would be in relationship with men who would not protect me, who would not honor me, who would not devote themselves to me, who would not value me, who would not commit to me, who would not see my value, recognize me, just like who would not do that for themselves either, right? They didn't value themselves and they didn't think highly enough of themselves. And they, a lot of them chose infidelity, which was something that my father did to my mother at some point there. And I also have spent about, I don't know, is it 5 years single now? Has it been 5 years? I think more than 5 years actually. You know, and like that's the absence of a man in my life. And the man is the protector. The man is the container. The man is the place where you can just kind of go, someone has my back, someone knows my value. And I'm talking about a compatible man, not just any man can do this, right? Obviously, because I've had relationship with men who couldn't do this for me, who were the reason why I felt like I needed to have my own back, who were the reason that I felt like, oh my God, I can't trust anybody. I've been with men who were the reason that I thought I can't do anything to get the love that I want from this person. Nothing is going to get them to see my value. But I've also been with men who made me realize the willingness to do that in myself, and how I was seeking outside for something that really was an inside job. It wasn't their job to see my value, it was mine. Because once I see my value, then I don't settle for men that don't see it. Right? Right. Trust me, right. And I'm much more fit to be in relationship now as this version of me who knows my value, who knows that I deserve to have the high standards, that I deserve to be with somebody who would have my back, who wouldn't have conversations behind my back that would hurt to hear about, you know, who wouldn't lie on me or try to manipulate me into thinking I'm lesser or not as important, or that I shouldn't think highly of myself, or that I have no right to be as confident as I am. You know, men who think that I need to feel insecure so that they are not at risk of losing me, so that they don't have to step up their game and be as committed and be as true and open and vulnerable, really. Because being in a relationship, I believe Brené Brown said something like this. I'm going to have to paraphrase, but it rung so true. She defined love as a relationship that, a, a space that grows between two people in a relationship who care enough to be vulnerable with each other and want to cultivate that space of understanding, care, and vulnerability between each other, and who also value each other and have the ability and desire to repair things when there is conflict or disagreement. I hesitate to use the word conflict in case it might be construed to mean that I think violence is okay in a relationship. I don't think there's any reason for it. I think that difference of opinion is natural and actually welcomed in my life because I like expanding my awareness. I'm not invested in proving myself right over everybody else. I think that would be silly because everybody has a unique view for a purpose. And I've been wrong or limited in my view so many times, but it never meant that the view that I had didn't serve me for the time that I had it. So if I think I know better for somebody than they know for themselves, then I would just be fooling myself to think that because I know through my own experience that the view they have is perfect for them at the time they have it. And if they want to expand their view to include something that I might have to offer in the way of insight or my own experience, then they would ask me. Then they would show interest and they would have a desire to understand through a natural curiosity. And I want to say natural curiosity here is an important thing because there's a curiosity that comes from a desire to manipulate and strategize, right? And I think that's the thing that we can really pay attention to when we're comfortable in our own space, we love ourselves and we know ourselves. If you're comfortable in your own space, you love yourself, you know yourself, and you've got your own back, then when someone comes to you and they have a curiosity, you can discern whether this is a curiosity rooted in the purity of their natural inclination to know through the heart, or if it's based on something more strategic, like they're gathering information in order to manipulate or coerce or whatever any of those type things are. But I think that I definitely relived many times the experience of not having a protector, right? Like I kept having experiences where it was like, oh, I got fooled by this deceiver. Oh, I got backstabbed, or oh, this person is two-faced, or oh, I've got cheated on. Oh, these people are talking behind my back. Oh, this person is nice to my face, but not so nice behind my back. Or oh, this person is actually envious of me. Oh, this person is actually jealous of me, which was preposterous to me, right? But when I got good with who I am and I understood that that was a possibility, that I actually do have some value and some that is a human way to feel, and sometimes we learn through that feeling, I allowed for the possibility and then was able to see it in others. Before that, I wasn't able to see it. I was blind to all these things because I just thought, well, I don't have anything to be jealous of, so that would be ridiculous. But because I was blind to things, not only that, but like the manipulation, the coercion, the controlling tactics, the all those kind of things, because I was blind to it, I put up with it and I lived it out. And that was a result of me as a soul, who didn't have a father, kind of letting myself learn what it was to not have a father, what it is to not have a father, or to not have a father who is healthy enough to take up that protector role, is to then match up with men who mimic that and who show you that you are carrying the energy of someone who doesn't feel protected by men. And it's like men are built differently. They're more muscular, they're stronger. I see this in my sons. Like, I mean, I am quite amazed at the strength um, that my sons have in um, all different ways. And I can see and value and understand the difference between a man and a woman in the physical body, and also other ways I've noticed. Nothing that so clearly that I can define it at this moment, but the way that the sort of self-image is in the culture, that's an obvious one. But also the biology of a man is different than the biology of a woman, obviously. The hormones are different. The function of the body, the muscular system, like men are in the role of protector, right? So as a woman who had to become her own protector, like I can see the value in it because, it's quite possible that we are evolving into a more neutral space where we both, we're all genders, men and women, are a bit more embodied as both energies. And so there may be more and more androgynous looking or feeling or being beings being born. And maybe that's what we see the preface of, where we see people blurring gender lines or not willing to identify and things like that. I don't know a lot about their experience personally, but just when I kind of dip out into the bigger picture view, that's kind of what I think to make sense of it, right? But from my experience in the body that I'm in and the incarnation I am in a feminine incarnation, and I desire to experience the feminine energy. So, in order to do that comfortably, I had to make my own container of protection. I had to have my own back. I had to be the protector. I had to learn how to understand and decipher when somebody actually is, lying to my face, or if somebody has poor intentions or is actually trying to manipulate me. And so I had to go into all these nuanced energies, and I had to experience them in order to understand them and learn about them and study them. And I had a lot of them I had to experience over and over and over again, because how else am I going to notice it unless it's a pattern, right? So the reason why I was able to see and learn how to make myself this protective container that I had to create in order to be the feminine version of myself in this incarnation was by all the people that I came in contact with who I perceived to or who actually did violate me in various ways, um, and show me the weaknesses within my protective space, like what I needed to actually protect myself from, what that masculine energy's role is within me, you know? So if I don't have a masculine beside me, then that's the role for me. But in terms of like, children coming into Earth to experience life with or without a father, I think it's probably been identified as um, an issue when we see a large segment of the population without fathers in the home, and then we see what happens to those children. And it's not that you can clump them all in and stereotype them like definitively in the categories of what the outcome is. But we do see that a large number of them are suffering with certain things that would indicate that they are lacking that protective space, that container that allows them to actually learn who they are and see themselves safely within the world. Like sometimes within a family home where there are two families, that space is taken away as well. Sometimes children are brought up in households where the parents are just wanting to put them into the boxes that they want them to fit in, like behave this way, do this, be this successful, make this amount of money, do this with your time. You're not valuable unless you do this. You're not worth speaking to unless you follow this rule. You know, if those kind of things are implemented in the young child, then they also lose the protective space in order for them to get to know themselves. So it's not just an exclusive lack of father issue, but it's a lack of effective father issue, right? Because these things can be passed along, so that's, I think, one of the reasons why I feel so happy that even if it's my children adapting and not healed from their father, potential father wounds, I'll say, um, the fact that they have made attempts, the fact that they did adapt is so beautiful to me, because it shows me this other way of being. And to have that example like so close to me has really been beautiful and comforting, you know and just to know that, like, um yes, they if they're not healed, and doing that from a healed space, then yes, maybe they are exerting a lot of energy in order to do that, but that doesn't mean that they're not on their own journey of healing, right? Because we all have a different path, to where we're going. So I would never want to take that away from them. But just in terms of how energy works, I just know that sometimes we can adapt out of a pattern that was passed along to us, and that ends up taking a lot more of our energy and having some ill effects as well. Um, but I think that where they are now is probably um, further along the path of healing, than if they had never recognized, if they were unconscious and never recognized that the need to break the pattern, you know? Like, my boys would never abandon their children. That's really comforting to me. Like their father abandoned them, and like my father essentially did abandon me. Now, I'm not saying I sit around blaming my father or that I'm acting like the victim. What I think that is, what I've observed now is that is simply a byproduct of my father's suffering, you know? And the same would go for their father as well. Of course, like I said, I attracted men who showed me the same traits that my father had. So their father, who was my first boyfriend, was the first man that I really attracted like that, who was going to show me the traits that my father had. And that was the traits of wanting to check out, of being in too much emotional pain to stay present and to be with the experience of being in a relationship, being in love, being committed, just like building something together that's actually worthwhile and enriching and growth inducing, like that's the power of the masculine. The masculine is the structure. The masculine is the foundation. The masculine is like the place into where birth and life begins. Okay. Hi. I got called away. I'm back just to finish this up. But the last thing that I had thought about mentioning is the importance of choosing, I'm going to say, a good father. I don't want to, the reason why I'm using the air quotes for the word good in front of father is because, you know, people make mistakes. People have to grow and learn, and, trial and error is a valid way to learn, especially on earth. The criteria you use when choosing a father, though, is worth considering, you know? And ideally, to know yourself before you choose the father would be ideal, because then you know what's important to you. Do your values align? Are you compatible? Things like this. I think now, if I were to want to choose a father for a child that I was willing to bring into this world, it would be someone who values family. That was never discussed with my very first boyfriend, who I stayed with 6 years and had 3 kids. It was all based on codependency back then, you know, my neediness for feeling safe. I was just grasping for that protection and that just value and importance outside of myself. And I didn't even know that I was capable of giving it to myself, because I had that, on the one hand, the example growing up of father not giving, of being that for a time, then not being there for a time, but my mother always kind of in the space of reacting to his not doing it even when he was there. You know what I mean? So I think this made for a very like complicated, layered, I'm gonna just say like bullshit, a bunch of bullshit, clusterfuck, to unravel and detangle and clear up my misunderstandings on and feel the feelings about the experiences I had because of the beliefs I formed and lived with due to the experiences I had. So I think without a father, I was just in that traumatized state of wanting, needing, and looking outside of myself. So it was kind of like I just needed something to fill the slot of that. And because I was in a traumatized state, and because I thought, oh, this is what I need, oh, this looks like it can fit into that thing that I need, not consciously, I'm saying subconsciously, I never actually was present within those relationships earlier on. Like, I never knew those men. They never knew me, because all they were to me was the thing I was using to pretend I was safe. It's like, oh, if I have that, then I'm safe. But it was an illusion. It was a game I was playing within my own subconscious about what safety was, because my own father was just the illusion of safe. So I settled for the illusion of safe, you know, because safety really comes in that willingness to be vulnerable and to let yourself be known and seen, and to do that with another being who really values that and wants to understand you and wants to know you on that deeper level, wants to know your inner thoughts, desires, feelings, goals, you know, fears. Like, I'm not saying that I want to like get together with someone who wants to tiptoe around my boo-boos. By no means. I'm saying I want to be with somebody who, when I reveal one of my own boo-boos to myself through our interactions, that he trusts that I'm going to take care of that within myself, and that I want us to work through whatever, and that I know my stuff is my responsibility, not his. He doesn't have to walk on eggshells, and I would prefer that he never does. You know, of course, leading with compassion and kindness, when appropriate, is really important, but not to his own detriment, right? Like, he has to respect himself and know himself enough that he knows what he needs, he knows what he wants, and that he won't compromise that. You know, like, he can't be a pushover. He can't be doing the thing that I was doing with the men earlier on in my life, right? He can't just be using me to fill a slot. Like, that is not the type of relationship I would settle for these days, you know? Had I been conscious enough to choose these things or know these things earlier on, it would have been different. But I would never have known these things had I not had the experience of not having them. You know, now I know what why they're so valuable, you know? So it's all perfect. Like, nothing's gone wrong here, essentially. Maybe there were choices made by people, including myself, but, you know, maybe the men, maybe including my father, maybe they had choices and they could have decided to get on board with the growth that I was on the trajectory of, and the learning and the spiritual advancement and the clearing away of traumas and the willingness to be vulnerable and committed and loyal, and repair rupture and allow difference. And, you know, they could have gotten on board with that. You know, some of them maybe had choice points that they they went on a different, leg of the journey, and we ended up on different timelines because of their choice. And that's part of it. It's like, that's allowed. And I think that me kind of attracting men who would do that, who would just not choose me, is also the recreation of the wound that I experienced from my father not choosing to stay on earth as my father and be in that role for me, you know? Um, Over the years, like, there was times where I would like look to my brother for guidance or help or protection. And then at some point in my healing journey, I just realized that wasn't fair, because he's my younger brother and he has his own life and his own, at some point, his own family to tend to. And so I needed to back off from that. So I recognize that I was kind of looking for it and longing for it all along. And I recognized that I had to become it for myself in order to even like feel safe enough to fully get to know myself on a even deeper level. Like, I had to be the safe space, I had to be the protector, I had to be willing to cut people out, to walk away, to call a spade a spade. You know what I mean? Like, I had to be willing to face all the stuff in me that I was earlier on inclined to put the rose-colored glasses on and ignore. And I had to like start facing reality as I was experiencing it, instead of reality as I wished and wanted it to be, while not believing that it could be. Because there's the difference, right? There's the issue in my energy was like these two sides of me, pitted against each other within me. So, sometimes I would attract, the attention of someone who was serious, and sometimes I would attract the attention of someone who wasn't serious. But I could never know the difference. Could never know the difference. And then if I attracted someone who was like me, who was just putting me into a slot, then I would usually be quite turned off by that early on in the relationship. I can remember like there was a period of time where I was like having a different man in my life for like a month at a time, for like, I don't know, like a full year, 6 months to a year. It was like, oh, a month is up. I guess this thing is done, because I don't feel the same way, you know. But every time I had gone into it thinking this is the one. So I was just like playing myself the whole time, and what I was really doing was like building my muscle enough to be safe enough to see what was really happening eventually, right? And that took trial and error, and a lot of error. And the thing about the trial and error, it was like I proved to myself that I could get back up even when I erred. And I erred so many times that I was very well convinced that I could trial and error. I could error and I could get back up. So then it becomes like, oh, I'm the safe space. I'm the safe space. I'm the container that's willing to like look at this in truth, in reality. Because like, why not? Because the worst that's going to happen is it's not going to work out and we'll have to part ways. And gee, maybe I can do that in a more adult manner if I'm willing to face it head on, instead of getting angry when they disillusion me, you know? Like, because I was just like having men fill the slot and be the thing that I wanted or expected of them, like be the protector. Um, then if they did something that broke the illusion for me, like if they showed themselves as someone who didn't have my back, that would like trigger me so hard. And I would just be like distraught, because now my reality was trying to show me that like what I thought was true wasn't true. And it would like re-traumatize me, you know? And I think that goes back to show like my thoughts about father. Like, I thought that father was like with you the whole time, would not leave, was always going to be devoted, And that was just not true. And that was a shock to me. And this is just like these are nuanced layers of the confusion or misunderstandings and hurt and pain that I experienced due to the actual, you know, experience of having the father that I had. So, what it comes down to is, yeah, I'm perfectly fine without father now, but I really do see the benefit of fathers and I see the benefit of the fathers that stick around, step up, and value the relationships with their children. And I think that it's not like fathers who can't do that are necessarily choosing it. It's not like fathers who can't do that are bad people, because I think it stems from that same wounding that my family had, which is like, it's a bit of narcissism, right? Because if the father and the son or the father and the daughter can't connect on a deeper level, there's probably some narcissism in there, and I experienced that as well, right? In those earlier relationships where I wasn't connecting on a deeper level, I was just kind of filling the slot of someone as the person that made me feel like I'm safe. Um, I wasn't connecting on that deeper level because I had already broken that ability in myself through my upbringing with this narcissistic tendency. And that narcissism looked just like people in the household not being able to ask for their needs to be met directly. So resorting to manipulation, coercion, creating people pleasers in the household, creating people who are willing to overlook things in the household, and people who were not willing to admit their own needs in the household. Because when no one is going to meet your need, um, it's like, why even pay attention to having that need? And this is where low self-esteem and lack of self-care all kind of rise up within somebody, and later resulting in anxiety and depression and all kinds of things like that. All because the household was run in such a way where children who were wounded grew up to be adults who were still wounded, who had children who were then passed along in the wound, and the wound looked like, I have a need, and I don't think that it will be met here because something else is more important, which may have been the survival of the parents, their survival thinking, their lack, or their own need was taking precedence. And then there's this violent swinging from, I can't get my needs met, to I need my need met right now. And if I need my need met right now, then there's this narcissism sneaking out where I have a tendency to expect you to fill my need without even a care in the world about who you actually are and what you might need. You know what I mean? And it's like, so in the family dynamic, it was like one person expecting their need to be met immediately by another person without regard for who that person was, their needs, their abilities, anything like that. So you can see there's like entitlement wrapped in there, there's expectation, all these things that are the grounds for unfair relating and codependency, and just like stuff that has to be broken. The cycle has to be broken. Someone has to recognize it. Someone has to be willing to feel the pain and process through the experiences they had with the bigger picture view, so that they can break the cycle. And that means acknowledging it, validating, how you feel and why you've been acting the way you have about whichever extreme you might be on in the scenario, and you might swing back and forth between both, and accepting that that's the case, right? Because once you accept it, you're not fighting against it, you're not trying to blame someone, you're just like, it's in your lap. You don't agree with it having happened to you. You're not saying it's great, let's continue on. You're just accepting that this is the reality that there is, right? And then being present with any feelings that come up due to the fact that you've recognized and accepted that you are in a situation where you have been either demanding of someone else to meet your need immediately without regard for them and what they need, or you've been failing to ask directly for your needs to be met, and either suppressing, denying, repressing, or covertly manipulating and trying to get your needs met, because you don't think your needs will be met if you do ask for them to be met directly. Or maybe you're even fearful that you would be a burden to someone else if you did have a need. So these are all some examples of the things that I've experienced from the upbringing that I had, because of all the violence and things like that. Like, that was all stemming from these narcissistic tendencies of people being expectant, entitled, and not having their needs met and not thinking that they can get their needs met. And you can see how that trickled into the way that I chose to relate, having had the experiences that I had. Like, I didn't know how to connect deeper with a man because that was not shown to me. I was just modeled people who were in trauma responses trying to like be in the slot of the need being filled for the other person, without them either ever recognizing that the other person was not able to meet their need, and that they actually hadn't even identified what their need actually was in themselves, you know? And I think it's important. One of the things that I had to do to start to heal was to take responsibility for filling my own need. So that caused me to start recognizing my need. Okay, I have a need. What is the need? I know I need something here. So what is it? And it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to give that to myself, you know. And at first that was scary and sad, and I had to cry a lot about it, because I was like, I just want someone else to love me. How can I do that for myself? It's like, okay, well, you can. And at first, in the process of learning to love myself, I didn't know that I could, but I did some research, and the evidence, the research that I did showed that it was a process of taking one step at a time and showing up for yourself day by day. And so then I saw this quote that said, like, you could start now, or you could wait. The time is going to pass anyway. So would you rather look back and be thankful that you started, or look back and know that you're just the same place that you always were? And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be taking these steps. And I thank goodness that I did take those steps, because it did lead somewhere. It did lead me out of that place of feeling disempowered, feeling unloved, unlovable, not knowing my value, not knowing my needs, not knowing what was important to me, not knowing my strengths, not knowing my weaknesses, and settling for just like fantasy illusions in order to like placate myself on thinking that things were good, or I was doing the thing, or I was living a life that was worthwhile, or I was safe, or I was protected, or somebody loved me. It was like all that. It was like this all big like show for my own self, where people were willing to play the parts, and I was playing the part for them too. And I couldn't even tell you what any of those men that I have spent time with, even years of my life being in a relationship with, I couldn't even tell you what any of them think of me. I do not know, because that is not the kind of conversations that ever happened. I never had experiences with men who were willing to be vulnerable. I never had experiences with men who were willing to share with me what they actually liked about me or valued about me. I had the experience of being with men who seemed to encourage me to feel insecure, and who seemed to not cheer me on, even steal my thunder at times. Like, I can remember being with one particular man who, whenever we were out having a good time, if I was having a really good time, dancing, enjoying music, whatever, then he would immediately switch his mood to off, you know? And so we could never have a good time at the same time, and that was getting old. And and I noticed the pattern of it while in that relationship, and it was just like, what the heck. And that was probably reflecting back to me some internal subconscious belief that if I was enjoying life, that it would be taken away from me, you know? So that was a match to my own energy. That was a creation of my own, in the output of what my energy is. And these are just all based on, like, basically childlike conclusions made through experiences had. And the experiences had being viewed from the lens of lack, from the lens of there's not enough, from the lens of I need to survive this. And that has looped on, in the through my ancestry up until now, where I have taken this and I have, kind of picked it apart. I've experienced it, picked it apart, gotten to step above, step above, step above, to ultimately gain a bigger picture view each time I am able to step above something and no longer live out the loops and patterns of it. And then it's expanded my awareness enough to just make these conclusions or comments from my own perspective only, which is that, oh yeah, there's value in having a father. And there's value in having a father who, is in the energy of knowing himself, of growing, of learning, of willing to be present, of willing to be vulnerable, of willing to repair, of willing to let himself be known. And like, of course, he has to know himself, or be willing to know himself in that process too, right? Like, not just wear a mask, or not just try to show up and be the thing that you want or expect of him, right? Because that's all really those men could do, the ones that were perceptive enough to see that I was just putting them in a slot. Then they knew that they had to perform a certain role in order for me to be, content with them. So all they had to do was put up the facade or mask that they were fulfilling that role. And I never knew that that's what they were doing, because I never looked deeper, because I wasn't prepared yet to look at myself in those wounds yet. And that was the wounds that I had about my father not getting to know me deeper, about me not getting to know my father deeper, about me witnessing my mother and father not know themselves deeply or each other. And that perpetuation of basically trauma, also manifesting as narcissism, like where the unmet need, which is trauma within a being, is sort of filtering the view of and hijacking the actions, behaviors, and feelings of the being, which can cause them to act in ways that are unfair to other beings. And this is something that is very likely happening mutually within a relationship that does contain it. Meaning it's not just one-sided. It's not just like that's the narcissist. No, it's like, if I'm not present enough to be willing to see this person deeper, then I can like snow myself. Like I can like fool myself on that person is something that I expect them to be. So that's my version of narcissism. It's like, I'm going to pretend that you're the thing I want and need without ever really knowing if you are the thing I want or need. It's like not really knowing or caring about the other person. It's just like putting them in a slot. So it's narcissistic. It's and I think some people can get stuck in feeling like a victim to that if they've experienced someone who was playing the role and pretending to be the thing that they thought that you wanted from them. And you realize it and you're disillusioned and you're like, wait a minute, you're not even really that thing. It can be appealing to point your finger and just be like, yeah, you're the problem. You're the narcissist. You're the bad one. You're the manipulator. You were trying to fool me. And be like the victim, oh, like, poor me, like, this wasn't fair. Or I did this, this, and this. I gave you all my time. I gave you all my money. I invested so much. I trusted you. I let you do this, this, and this. Like, meanwhile, it's like, not admitting that you literally ignored all those other things so that you could have them in that slot, that you were just like holding them there. And that if you were to admit that, then you'd have to admit that, you have responsibility in the situation as well. And that relationship of codependency and unfair relating is a mutual thing that's happening on both sides. And that, and it can be healed, right? Like this is possible to heal. This is possible to become aware of. This is possible to break the cycle of. But if you do claim yourself the victim and start pointing the finger and blame, then you won't take the step of taking responsibility, of acknowledging, validating, accepting the reality that you're in, and then you cannot move through it. Then you will stay in the cycle, and you might even swear off men while pointing the finger and saying, oh, I'm just too damaged from those narcissistic, abusive relationships I was in. Meanwhile, never taking responsibility for your part in it and acting or reinforcing yourself on the story that you're the victim of it, which, it's a valid stance to take. And I understand that sometimes the people who we use to fill those slots for ourselves are very sneaky, are very clever, are really, really going above and beyond to screw us over. I get that. And so you can get victimized by that. And it's valid to allow yourself to feel those feelings. And it's actually important to help you to allow yourself to feel those feelings, because once you are present with the feelings of that experience of being victimized, then you can get above the experience, and then you can move through it and eventually get to the place where you can stop spending energy on perpetuating the story about being a victim in it, and start taking responsibility for your part in it, so that you can heal the part of you that allowed that experience for yourself, you know, by, looking at the weaknesses in you, in your operating system and in your beliefs that it revealed to you. And those are really valuable. And it doesn't make sense to ignore those, because it's like little, I was going to say breadcrumbs on your path, but yeah, I'm just going to say it's like a little breadcrumb on your path, like of information that will get you to go in the direction that you need to go in order to clear these things from your energy body, so that you don't keep reliving them. If you can understand them, if you can alchemize the energy, balance it out, and get above it, then you don't have to stay in these loops. And then you can get a clearer view of what the dynamic is from the outside of it. And then it's much easier to understand, the contrast and what you would prefer, having experienced that which you did not prefer, you know? So it's not like invalid to have these experiences with fathers who were also damaged and traumatized. It's not necessarily true that these are bad people, but you might have experienced some that you would classify as bad. And maybe there's a part of you that fears forgiveness and fears letting go of the hurt and the feeling of being victimized in it, because you fear that you will let yourself get back into one of those relationships. And that is understandable as well. That is valid too. And I just want to add that is something that you should recognize within yourself and look for the root cause of. Why am I afraid? Oh, maybe because, for instance, as an example, maybe you saw your mother always experiencing the bad relationship, and then going back into it even every time she tried to leave. Those yo-yo situations where there's like an abusive relationship and one person tries to leave and they go back in, and then they try to leave and they go back in. It's like maybe you fear that you will do the same if you don't hold on to the hurts, right? So maybe there's other work in front of you that you need to do to strengthen your own self-esteem, your own willingness to trust yourself, your own self-value. All those kind of things can help to make sure that you know that you do have a secure foundation on which that you can trust yourself. And that, for me, took the daily steps of doing what it took to love myself, to care for myself, and doing it over and over and taking the next step. And yay, I made it this far, And it's like over time, earned back my own trust, whereas like I knew like, okay, well, I've been doing it this long, I'm gonna have my back no matter what, you know. And so thereby I built the container, the structure in which where I knew I could trust myself to have my own back. And that was the space where then I could be willing to see more of the more hurtful stuff, where it was like, okay, well, if I'm not going to go back into this, I need to have this structure. I need to know that I have my own back. I need to know that it's okay for me to have higher standards and things like this, right? So whatever it takes, it's like the next thing that's showing up as a hindrance, or the thing that you haven't overcome yet, you can ask yourself, what is the hidden benefit of me having this pattern? You know, and sometimes when you ask yourself that question, and your subconscious will answer you and be like, well, if I don't have this fear, then I will go back, or whatever it may be. And it's like, listen to those things, like, ask and you shall receive. You can get answers. Sorry, my fingernail was like crooked, and it was really bothering me. So my nails are getting to that length where I probably want to cut them soon. Okay. I've been blabbing for a while about fathers. All in all, I think this whole experience of being on Earth, and just even getting to look at the role of a father in life is kind of cool. And I don't know everything. These are just my thoughts from my perspective and my experiences. Like, that's all I can ever offer, right? All right. So, yeah. What do you think?